threw a party in the county jail. The prison band was there and they began to wail. The band was jumping and the joint began to swing. You should have heard this knocked out jailbird sing. Let it rock, everybody let it rock.
This video was made possible by my patrons, Joshua Bartlett, James Schubach, Douglas Smith, Capitalism is Good, and Pipsqueak. Thank you so much to all of you. Hello everyone, this is My Two Cents, and today I'd like to talk about criminology, the study of crime and criminals. As someone with an academic background in criminal justice, this is a topic I'm very familiar with, and one that I believe is very helpful in exposing the errors of leftist ideology. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with criminology, the field involves the study of various theories that seek to explain why criminals choose to commit crimes. While there have been numerous theories proposed throughout the years, the field itself is broken down broadly into the classical school of criminology and the positivist school of criminology. The classical school of criminology is one grounded in a more libertarian view of the world. It holds that man is a rational agent who makes decisions with his free will. As such, criminals who commit aggressions against their fellow men do so because of a rational calculation in which they have determined that doing so is to their benefit. The solution to preventing crime is then found in making it against one's interest to commit crimes. This is primarily done through punishing criminals with imprisonment or death, or through deterring criminals with security and other means of removing the opportunity for committing crimes. Cesare Beccaria, an Italian criminologist and philosopher in the late 1700s, is sometimes said to be the father of the classical school of criminology. His work, On Crimes and Punishments, lays out his views regarding the nature of mankind, his motivations, and what must be done to deter criminal behavior. It has been said that this work was a major influence on many of the founding fathers of the United States. In his work, Beccaria stated, "No man ever freely surrendered a portion of his own liberty for the sake of the public good. Such a chimera appears only in fiction. If it were possible, we would prefer that the pacts binding others did not bind us. Every man sees himself as the center of the world's affairs." Indeed, Beccaria held to this self-evident notion that is at the core of libertarian philosophy. People left to their own devices tend to make the decisions that are best for them, without regard for others. Given this reality, what system or systems make society best for everyone? In the case of economics, the answer is clearly capitalism, as it is the only system that uses mankind's selfish instincts to force him to put the needs of his customers above those of his own if he wants to make a profit. What then would follow for the handling of criminals who commit aggressions against fellow members of society? Beccaria went on to say, "It was thus necessity that compelled men to give up part of their personal liberty, and so it is that each is willing to place in the public depository only the least possible portion, no more than what it takes to induce others to defend it. The aggregate of these smallest possible portions constitutes the right to punish. Everything that exceeds this is abuse, not justice. It is a matter of fact, not of right." Essentially, it was Beccaria's view that man is willing to sacrifice the right to aggression, if that is a right at all. I don't think it is, but that's beside the point in this case. Man is willing to sacrifice the right to aggression in order for the rest of his liberty to be preserved. It is therefore necessary to punish those who commit aggressions against others, but only proportionally to the nature of their offense. Many criminologists believe that from Beccaria stems the old adage, the punishment must fit the crime. By contrast, the positivist school of criminology is built on the notion that there are in fact underlying causes of crime. Within the positivist school, you'll find the biological theory of crime, psychological theory of crime, and even the Marxist theory of crime. All of them holding that genetic factors, intelligence and personality, or economic inequality are the factors that lead people to commit crimes. While positivist theories do not necessarily imply hard determinism, the belief that people have no free will and simply react according to their circumstances, they do lean in this direction. Someone holding to a positivist theory of crime would hold that non-criminals possess some quality that criminals do not, or vice versa, and if we could simply give that quality to criminals, crime would mostly, if not completely, disappear from society. For example, William Bonner, a proponent of the Marxist theory of crime, argued in his 1916 work, Criminality and Economic Conditions, that the capitalist economic system criminalized the greed of the poor while encouraged the greed of the rich. If society simply adopted socialism, so Bonner claimed, crime would be eliminated completely. By this point, it should be clear that those on the political right are far more likely to adopt theories within the classical school of criminology, and those on the political left are far more likely to adopt theories within the positivist school of criminology. Now, anyone who is involved in the discussion of academic theories knows that while many theories are proposed, the question becomes which theory best represents reality as it has been observed. If a theory is correct, there ought to be historical data that shows as such. However, the left has shown time and time again that it is utterly unconcerned about such data. If anything, for the left, data is only a tool that can be selectively used to enforce their vision for society. When it comes to economics, politics, or in this case, criminal justice, we will see that the left will always be willing to dismiss evidence contrary to their theories, or, more frequently, blame their theories' failures on the very people who told them they wouldn't work in the first place. So, how do criminological theories demonstrate this tendency of the left? Well, as Thomas Sowell documents in his book, The Vision of the Anointed, Self-Congratulation as a Basis for Social Policy, prior to the 1960s, the American criminal justice system was based heavily in the classical school of criminology, viewing criminals as free agents who chose to commit their crimes and therefore deserved appropriate punishment when apprehended. The data would seem to have indicated that this was working as well. According to the U.S. Bureau of Census, the number of murders in the United States was lower in 1960 than it had been for the past 3 decades, despite a quickly growing population and the addition of 2 new states, Hawaii and Alaska. In fact, proportionate to the population, the murder rate in 1960 was less than half of what it had been in 1934. Nonetheless, powerfully placed figures on the political left began to speak out against the classical school of criminology, calling it primitive, irrational, and doomed to never solve the problem of criminality. Chief Judge David Bazelon of the Circuit Court of Appeals for Washington, D.C., stated that modern behavioral scientists needed to be employed to determine the underlying causes of crime. In Bazelon's view, criminals did not need to be punished, as they were just as much victims of society as their victims were the victims of crime. According to Bazelon, criminals needed hospitals, not prisons. The goal of criminal justice should not be punishment, but rather rehabilitation. As a result, the next few decades saw massive amounts of judicial decisions and executive reform of the criminal justice system, focusing on the rights of the accused and turning prisons into places where inmates would receive education and be prepared to re-enter society as better persons. The result? Crime rates skyrocketed. In 1974, the murder rate was more than double what it had been in 1961. By 1976, every citizen was now 3 times more likely to suffer a major violent crime, and the arrest rate of juveniles more than tripled by 1990. Despite this objective data, members of the left refused to acknowledge that it was even possible that the surge in crime had to do with the shift from the classical view of criminology to the positivist one. At first, some attempted to say that the process by which crimes were documented were simply improving, and thus the increase in crime rates were simply the result of documenting more crimes that hadn't been known about beforehand. But this did not hold as a plausible explanation for long. Instead, it became commonplace to assert that any talk of rising crime rates was, you guessed it, racist, since it was well documented that blacks commit a far larger portion of overall crime. In 1981, Bazelon published an article in the American Bar Journal stating that while the classical theories of criminology may be, quote, intuitively attractive, only rehabilitation could end crime in the long term. All this despite the fact that the data had contradicted this hypothesis, which he'd first put forward 20 years earlier. Now that it had become accepted that criminals are victims of society, no discussion about rising crime rates could even take place without accusations of racism or privilege. The leftists ensured their vision for criminal justice succeeded, despite hard evidence to the contrary. Today, prisons receive federal and state funding to ensure that inmates receive literary training. Federal prisons, in particular, must ensure that inmates reach a certain level of literacy before they can opt out of receiving such education. Inmates are fed and housed at the expense of the American taxpayer, and it is documented that some actually prefer prison to being on the street. Jose Inez Garcia Zarat, the undocumented illegal immigrant responsible for the death of Kate Steinle, guilty of 7 felonies and having been deported more than 5 times from the United States already, is doing what at the moment exactly? Well, he's sitting in an American prison. And based on what I know about the criminal justice system, he's probably breathing a sigh of relief about how much better life is in an American prison than in Mexico. I've heard so many liberals talk about how illegal immigrants are just poor people hoping for a better life in America. Yeah, well, have you considered that there is seriously something wrong when life in an American prison is preferable to life in your home country? In my criminal justice studies, I have read the accounts of and personally interviewed corrections officers in the United States that confirm that prisons have become far more like hospitals, or in some cases, even retirement homes. This is not to say that prison is the place you want to be, or that there are not terrible things that still happen in prisons. It's only to say that prisons are more about rehabilitation than punishment. What's really going on here is a power play by the left. Leftist strategy in criminal justice and in every other sphere is to convince people that they are victims. It doesn't matter of what. White privilege, economic inequality, anything the left can use to tell people that they are not responsible for their problems and that nothing they ever do could fix their problems. The left then offers them a solution. Elect us, give us more power and more money, and we will fix your problems for you. However, the policies they institute, such as the embrace of the positivist school of criminology, only lead to an increase in the problems, just as the leftists always knew they would. They then claim things would have been even worse had their policies not been instituted, rendering their views unfalsifiable, and blame their political opposition for the very problems that they themselves created. This ensures that they stay in power and that they continue to receive ever more power until we're all living in an all-out totalitarian regime. The problem of criminality can be solved in the same way that I propose we solve every other problem in society. Reinstitute personal responsibility, seeing criminals as free agents and appropriately punishing them and deterring them with better security measures. So long as people see themselves as victims, the left will only increase its control until it's too late. That's my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe. You can also hit the bell to ensure you're notified every time I upload a new video. This video was made possible by my patrons, Joshua Bartlett, James Schubach, Douglas Smith, Capitalism is Good, and Pipsqueak. Thank you so much to all of you. If anyone else would like to donate and help ensure that I have the time and resources to keep putting out content, for just $1 a month on Patreon, you'll receive a shout out at the beginning and end of every video, and the link to one of your social media platforms in the description. You can also follow me on Twitter, Minds.com, BitChute, WordPress, Gab, and iTunes. Uploads are every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, so stay tuned for more videos.